Your brilliant podcast is already failing if you've chosen one of these dead-on-arrival names. Have you ever scrolled through podcast apps and completely ignored shows with names that tell you absolutely nothing about what they offer? It happens thousands of times every day, and your podcast could be the next victim. By the end of this video, you'll discover my perfect name formula that will make your podcast instantly recognizable, easy to find, and impossible to forget. I'll show you exactly why most podcast names fail and give you a framework that guarantees yours will stand out from the crowd. Let's get real. Most podcast names are forgettable AF. I've seen brilliant content creators pour their hearts into amazing episodes, only to bury them under names so bad that no one ever discovers them. The harsh truth is that the podcast world has become brutally competitive. With over 2 million podcasts out there, your name isn't just a label, it's your first and often only chance to grab attention. Think about it. Before someone hears a single word of your carefully crafted content, they're making split-second decisions based solely on your name. A weak name means automatic dismissal. No clicks, no downloads, no audience. Imagine having a podcast name so magnetic that people can't help but click. Picture your show name spreading through word of mouth because it's instantly memorable. Visualize your podcast appearing at the top of search results because you nailed the perfect keywords in your title. The right name creates momentum from day one. It triggers curiosity, communicates value, and makes your show easy to recommend. It's the difference between struggling to find listeners and having them find you. But I know the roadblocks you're facing. You think you need something clever and punny to stand out. Or maybe you're tempted to use industry jargon to sound professional. Perhaps you're considering using your own name even though you're not yet well known in your field. These are exactly the traps that lead to forgettable, unsearchable names that kill podcasts before they even launch. When I started my first podcast, I fell into this exact trap. I chose what I thought was a brilliant, clever name. It was a play on words that made me chuckle every time I heard it. The problem? Nobody could remember it, nobody could spell it, and worst of all, it gave zero indication of what my show was actually about. 3 months in, despite great content, my download numbers were dismal. I made the painful decision to rebrand with a clear, descriptive name. Within weeks, my audience doubled, then tripled. Same content, different name. That's how powerful this decision is. The name you choose will either open doors to growth or create a permanent ceiling for your podcast. It will either make marketing easy or force you to constantly explain what your show is about. It will either help you stand out or ensure you blend into the forgettable mass of podcasts that never find their audience. This isn't just about picking a name you like, it's about strategic positioning that will impact every aspect of your podcast's growth. First tip: what kills a good name? This is absolutely crucial. Understanding what makes podcast names fail will save you from the most common mistakes. Look at this carefully. Here are the 5 deadly sins of podcast naming. Too clever. Names like 𝗣𝗢𝗘𝗖𝗞 might make you chuckle, but they confuse potential listeners and make word-of-mouth recommendations nearly impossible. Too generic. The business talk show puts people to sleep. There's nothing to grab attention or distinguish you from the thousands of other business podcasts. Too long. Everything you ever wanted to know about marketing but were afraid to ask. Nobody's typing that into a search bar, and no one's going to remember it correctly. Too hard to spell. The creative conversation forces people to guess at spellings and makes it nearly impossible to find your show. Too similar. The daily news show will forever live in the shadow of The Daily. You'll never escape the comparison, and you'll always rank lower in searches. I want you to realize that the name of your podcast is the first thing people will see, so it better make an impression fast. A great podcast name doesn't need to be explained. It should click immediately and make people curious about what they'll get. Second tip: the perfect name formula. Now, this is where you want to pay attention. I'm going to give you the exact formula for creating a name that attracts listeners and makes your podcast easy to find. First, your name must be memorable. This means easy to spell, like armchair expert. Easy to say, avoid tongue twisters or awkward phrasing. Easy to search, think about what people would type. Easy to remember after hearing it just once. The truth is that simplicity almost always beats cleverness when it comes to podcast names. If you want to master this naming strategy, along with all the other critical elements for podcast success, check out my podcast academy by clicking the link in the first comment. I dive much deeper into these principles and provide you with templates, examples, and frameworks that will help your podcast stand out from day one. Second, your name should be descriptive. This will blow your mind. The most successful podcast names tell you exactly what you're going to get, how I built this. You instantly know you'll hear business origin stories, Science Friday, weekly science news and topics, the History Hour, historical deep dives, Song Exploder, breaking down individual songs, Sleep With Me, bedtime stories to fall asleep, to compare these to bad examples like The Morning Show, which one, just chatting, with who, about what, or random topics, why should I care? Listen closely to what I'm about to share. Using your own name only works if you already have significant name recognition. If you're not already famous in your field, your name alone doesn't tell potential listeners anything about your content. Third, your name must be unique. This is the key to success. You need to stand out from the crowd while still being descriptive. Before finalizing your name, check podcast directories to make sure it isn't already taken or too similar to another show. Fourth, make it searchable. This will completely change your podcast growth. Consider keywords that your ideal listeners might search for. Avoid weird spellings or made-up words that no one would ever type into a search bar. Third tip, proven naming strategies. Let me show you the different approaches that top podcasts use for their names. Yoga Girl, activity plus target audience, The Productivity Show, clear focus on productivity, startup stories, topic plus content format. Notice how none of these successful shows rely on puns, inside jokes, or clever wordplay that might confuse potential listeners. Here's what I want you to remember. The most successful shows aren't trying to win creative writing awards with their names. They're focused on being found, remembered, and shared. Before you lock in your podcast name, ask yourself these 4 critical questions. Can someone spell it after hearing it once? Does it tell them what content they'll get? Is it different enough to stand out? Can they find it easily through online searches? Remember, your clever wordplay might make you chuckle, but if listeners can't remember it or tell their friends about it, your podcast is dead in the water before you start. Keep it simple, clear, and catchy. If you're ready to create a podcast name that attracts your ideal clients and positions you for growth, my podcast academy includes comprehensive guidance on strategic naming with templates and frameworks to ensure your podcast stands out in a crowded market. Let me know in the comments what names you're considering for your podcast, and I'll give you my honest feedback on which ones have the most potential. And if you found this video helpful, you absolutely need to watch my video on the language strategy that will make or break your podcast next. Once you've chosen the perfect name, you'll need to make another critical decision about which language to podcast in. That video will show you how to strategically choose between English and your native language to maximize your reach and authority while minimizing competition.